the movie that emptied beaches across America in the summer of 1975, holds secrets deeper than the waters it made us fear. Jaws, Steven Spielberg's breakout thriller, created the summer blockbuster template. But what most viewers never realized is that beneath its surface lurks a hidden dimension of creative desperation, technical nightmares, and career-defining gambles. What if you discovered the film's most iconic moments were accidents of necessity? What if the terror you felt wasn't created by what you saw, but precisely by what you didn't? Let's dive beneath the surface of this cinematic landmark and explore the treacherous waters its cast and crew navigated to create a masterpiece. Because once you understand what was happening behind the camera, you'll never watch Jaws the same way again. This is the story that most fans never figured out. Jaws wasn't just a movie about a shark, it was a production that nearly sank under the weight of its own ambition. The film we know today exists not because of meticulous planning, but because of catastrophic technical failures that forced its young director to reinvent cinema on the fly. At its core, Jaws tells a simple story. A great white shark terrorizes the small beach town of Amity Island, leading three men, Police Chief Martin Brody, Roy Scheider, marine biologist Matt Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss, and grizzled shark hunter Quint Robert Shaw, to hunt the beast. But the making of this straightforward tale was anything but simple. Universal Pictures greenlit the adaptation of Peter Benchley's best-selling novel with a modest $3.5 million budget and a tight 9-week shooting schedule. The studio envisioned a quick production that would capitalize on the book's success. What followed instead was a 159-day nightmare shoot that tripled the budget and nearly derailed Spielberg's career before it truly began. The problems began with the ocean itself. Producer David Brown would later admit, "We started with all the mistakes you could possibly make. The worst mistake was to shoot on the Atlantic Ocean. The unpredictable waters off Martha's Vineyard became both setting and antagonist, a daily battle against tides, weather, and passing boats that ruined countless shots. But the true villain of the production wasn't the ocean, it was the shark." The decision to build a full-size mechanical shark, affectionately nicknamed Bruce, after Spielberg's lawyer, would become both the film's greatest liability and its salvation. Three 25-foot rubber and pneumatic sharks were constructed at a cost of $250,000 each. They were technological marvels on paper. Full-scale monsters designed to swim, bite, and terrify on command. But the moment the first shark hit the saltwater, disaster struck. It was designed for freshwater testing in California, effects supervisor Bob Matty revealed years later. Nobody accounted for the corrosive effects of salt water on the pneumatic systems. The result was catastrophic. The sharks sank. They floated when they should have submerged. Their skin deteriorated. Their mechanical jaws jammed mid-take. Sometimes they worked perfectly in rehearsal, only to fail the moment cameras rolled. In a 1975 interview with Rolling Stone, Richard Dreyfuss didn't mince words. "The shark was a disaster. I tell people this with a smile now, but it never worked. We called it the turd on set. Fondly, of course. This technological failure became the crucible that forged Spielberg's genius. With a malfunctioning star and mounting production costs, the 27-year-old director faced a career-ending disaster. The studio executives were flying in weekly to assess the chaos. Firing seemed imminent. And then Spielberg made the decision that would transform the disaster into a masterpiece. If the shark wouldn't work, Spielberg would simply hide it. This wasn't the original plan. The script called for the shark to make frequent appearances throughout the film. The storyboards showed the creature in all its terrifying glory from early scenes. But necessity forced Spielberg to radically reimagine his approach. When something is not working, you have to begin to become like a politician, a tap dancer, a magician, Spielberg later confessed. "I had to figure out how to tell the story without the shark." The solution was both elegant and psychological. Suggest the shark's presence rather than show it. The filmmaker turned to the techniques of suspense masters like Alfred Hitchcock and Val Lewton, creating terror through anticipation rather than revelation. The yellow barrels that rise from the water to track the shark's movement. The ominous movement of the pier as it's dragged into the ocean. The shadow beneath the water. The ripple on the surface. These became the shark's signatures, more terrifying in their implication than any rubber monster could have been. John Williams' now legendary two-note theme, perhaps the most recognizable musical cue in cinema history, became the shark's voice, announcing its presence with greater impact than any visual could achieve. What had begun as a desperate workaround became the film's greatest strength. The mechanical failure had forced Spielberg to engage the most powerful special effect of all, the audience's imagination. And that's when Jaws transcended from a monster movie to a masterpiece of suspense. While the shark remained mostly hidden, the human drama at the heart of Jaws came sharply into focus. The decision to concentrate on the three men hunting the creature transformed what could have been a simple horror film into a character-driven adventure. The dynamic between Brody, Hooper, and Quint created a psychological triangle that mirrored the larger themes of man versus nature, modernity versus tradition, and fear versus courage. But what most viewers never realized is how much of this dynamic emerged from the real-life tension on set. Roy Scheider, cast after Spielberg, saw him in the French Connection, brought an everyman quality to Brody that grounded the film in relatable fear. Richard Dreyfuss, just 27 years old and fresh off American Graffiti, embodied the cocky, scientific approach to the threat. And Robert Shaw, the acclaimed actor and writer, provided the weathered experience and fatalistic worldview. But it was the genuine friction between Dreyfuss and Shaw that electrified their scenes together. Robert Shaw couldn't stand me, Dreyfuss later admitted. He thought I was this Jewish kid from Beverly Hills who was privileged and didn't know what life was about. Shaw, struggling with alcoholism during the troubled production, would deliberately antagonize Dreyfuss before their scenes together. He would sometimes drink during lunch breaks and return to set with a combative edge that translated directly to Quint's hostile relationship with Hooper. During the famous USS Indianapolis monologue, Shaw arrived on set intoxicated for the first take, which Spielberg scrapped. The next day, completely sober, Shaw delivered the chilling monologue that would become one of cinema's most memorable moments, a 5-minute unbroken scene that silenced even the crew during filming. Spielberg, showing wisdom beyond his years, recognized that this real-life tension served the story and allowed it to play out within controlled boundaries. The result was an authenticity to their interactions that no script could have manufactured. What viewers see on screen isn't just acting, it's the genuine dynamic between three men trapped not just on a sinking boat, but on a sinking production. As production troubles mounted, Jaws increasingly became a film written on the fly. The screenplay, which had gone through multiple writers, including Peter Benchley and playwright Howard Sackler, was constantly being revised to accommodate the technical limitations and the evolving characterizations. This necessity for adaptation led to some of the film's most iconic moments that were never in the original script. Perhaps the most famous line in the film, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," was an improvised quip by Roy Scheider. The actor had been hearing crew members use the phrase whenever the support boats proved inadequate for a particular shot. When Scheider's character first sees the shark, the line came to him naturally, and cinema history was made. The scene where Hooper and Brody discover Ben Gardner's boat and the head suddenly appears in the hull? That was a reshoot added months after principal photography when Spielberg felt the film needed an additional scare. Filmed in editor Verna Field's swimming pool with a fake boat hull, it cost just $3,000 but provided one of the film's most effective jump scares. Even the ending was reimagined during production. The original screenplay called for a much more conventional conclusion, but the malfunctioning shark necessitated the now iconic explosion that ends the film. "Smile, you son of a bitch." It wasn't written. It emerged from the collaborative energy of a cast and crew, desperately trying to salvage their troubled production. What fans rarely appreciate is that Jaws isn't just a film about adaptation and survival, it's a film that survived through adaptation itself, and that's where the true magic happened. Watch Jaws today, and you'll notice dozens of subtle details that most viewers miss, creative decisions that reveal the deeper psychology of the film and its characters. Consider the film's masterful use of color. Spielberg and cinematographer Bill Butler established a deliberate visual language. Yellow represents safety. Brody's home, the beach in daylight, while blue represents danger. The ocean, night scenes. This color coding operates on a subconscious level, preparing viewers emotionally for shifts in the narrative. Notice how the camera work subtly changes throughout the film. The early scenes on land use traditional, stable shots. But once we're on the orca hunting, the shark, the camera never stops moving, creating a constant sense of instability and seasickness that mirrors the character's precarious situation. Perhaps the most brilliant micro-detail comes in the film's structure itself. The first half follows a pattern where shark attacks occur in increasingly public settings. First, a lone swimmer at night, then a boy on a crowded beach in daylight, then a man in a pond with onlookers. This progression isn't accidental. It's a deliberate escalation that suggests the shark is getting bolder, more confident, almost learning. But the detail most viewers never catch appears in the film's infamous opening sequence. When Chrissy Watkins is attacked while skinny dipping, we famously see almost nothing of the shark. What most miss is that this scene was filmed with a stunt woman, Susan Backliney, being pulled along a track by crew members holding ropes underwater. The terror we see isn't acted, it's real fear as she's yanked unpredictably through dark water by forces she can't see. Her final reach for the buoy before being dragged under wasn't choreographed. It was a genuine attempt to grab something stable as she was pulled backward with unexpected force. This blurring of performance and reality appears throughout the film, creating an authenticity that audiences feel without recognizing its source. And that's just the beginning of what most viewers never notice. While sharks and rough seas created obvious challenges, the true conflict of Jaws played out in boardrooms and production offices far from Martha's Vineyard. Universal executives, watching their modest genre film balloon into the most expensive production in the studio's history, pushed repeatedly for compromises that would have fundamentally altered the film we know today. "Kill the Indianapolis monologue," came one note. "It stops the action." Another demanded more shark footage early in the film. Others suggested recasting Dreyfuss, whose star power hadn't yet been established. There were even discussions about shooting some scenes with a real great white shark in Australia to salvage the production. Each of these suggestions represented a fork in the road where Jaws could have become something very different, likely something far less effective. The most consequential battle came over the film's editing. Verna Fields, the veteran editor who would win an Academy Award for her work, found herself caught between Spielberg's vision and the studio's growing panic. Universal wanted a shorter, faster-paced film with more conventional scares. During post-production, Spielberg was simultaneously preparing for his next film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. When he saw Fields' first assembly of Jaws, he was reportedly so distraught over what he perceived as the film's failure that he considered abandoning filmmaking altogether. The edit that emerged was a compromise between artistic vision and commercial necessity, a perfect balance of character development and suspense that neither party would have created alone. Spielberg himself acknowledged the collaborative rescue. Verna saved the picture through her editing. She took a film that could have been a disaster and found its rhythm. The clash between art and commerce that played out behind the scenes of Jaws would become a template for Hollywood blockbusters for decades to come, a delicate negotiation that, when successful, satisfies both creative and commercial imperatives. And in this case, both sides could claim victory in what came next. When Jaws premiered on the 20th of June 1975, it didn't just succeed, it fundamentally altered the landscape of American cinema. The film opened in 464 theaters nationwide, an unusually wide release for the time following an unprecedented $700,000 television marketing campaign. Universal's gamble paid off immediately. The film earned back its entire budget in just 2 weeks. What happened next was something no one had seen before. Rather than following the typical pattern of strong opening weekend followed by declining attendance, Jaws actually increased its audience week after week as word of mouth spread. Lines stretched around blocks, theaters added midnight showings, people returned for second, third, even 10th viewings. By the end of its run, Jaws had grossed $124 million domestically and another $126 million internationally. It became the highest-grossing film of all time, a title it held until Star Wars 2 years later. But more significant than the numbers was the cultural impact. Jaws didn't just attract audiences, it changed their behavior. Beach attendance dropped dramatically that summer. Swimming instructors reported increased enrollment. The film entered the collective consciousness so thoroughly that even inland swimming pools saw decreased attendance. The film's tagline, "Don't go in the water," became a cultural catchphrase. Its poster image of the shark rising toward an unsuspecting swimmer became one of the most recognizable pieces of film art ever created. For Hollywood, the significance was clear. Jaws had created the summer blockbuster template that would define commercial filmmaking for the next half-century. And for a young director who had nearly seen his career destroyed by a malfunctioning mechanical shark, it represented something even greater. For Steven Spielberg, Jaws transformed a promising young filmmaker into Hollywood royalty virtually overnight. At 28 years old, he had created the highest-grossing film in history and established a directorial signature that would influence generations of filmmakers. The success liberated Spielberg to pursue increasingly ambitious projects. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Jurassic Park, each built upon the lessons learned during the troubled production of Jaws. "I don't think I've ever been as scared since Jaws," Spielberg confessed years later. After Jaws, nothing was as difficult again. The film's influence extended far beyond Spielberg's career. It established a new model for film production, marketing, and distribution that reshaped Hollywood's entire approach to commercial cinema. Before Jaws, summer was considered a dead zone for major film releases. The conventional wisdom held that people preferred outdoor activities to sitting in dark theaters during warm months. Jaws shattered that assumption, creating the summer blockbuster season that now represents Hollywood's most lucrative period. The film pioneered the saturation booking approach, opening widely across the country on the same day, supported by national television advertising. This strategy, now standard for major releases, was revolutionary in 1975 when films typically opened in major cities before gradually expanding. Jaws also transformed the merchandising potential of films: t-shirts, toys, games, soundtrack albums. The shark spawned an industry of tie-in products that demonstrated how a film's cultural footprint could extend far beyond the theater experience. Perhaps most significantly, Jaws showed Hollywood that genre films, horror, science fiction, adventure, could transcend their categories to become prestigious, critically acclaimed works that appealed to broad audiences. And the ripples continued to spread outward. Almost 5 decades later, Jaws remains not just a beloved classic, but an active influence on filmmaking, popular culture, and even marine conservation. The film's techniques for building suspense, the selective revealing of the monster, the use of music to signal threat, the establishment of rules that are then broken, became fundamental tools in the filmmaker's arsenal. From Alien to Jurassic Park, from the Blair Witch Project to Stranger Things, countless works have drawn from the Jaws playbook. John Williams's iconic score permanently altered film music. The simple alternating E and F notes became shorthand for approaching danger, so recognizable that it's SESA, now regularly parodied and referenced. Williams himself, who would go on to score Star Wars, Superman, Harry Potter, and dozens of other landmarks, considers it among his most effective work precisely because of its simplicity. Williams initially presented Spielberg with a complex, dissonant theme for the shark. The director asked for something more primal and direct. "What about just dun dun, dun dun?" Williams recalled Spielberg, suggesting. The composer initially thought it too simplistic but created a version that became one of cinema's most recognizable musical signatures. Beyond filmmaking, Jaws profoundly impacted public perception of sharks for better and worse. The film unintentionally demonized great whites, contributing to fear and misunderstanding that hampered conservation efforts for decades. Recreational shark hunting increased dramatically after the film's release, contributing to population declines. Peter Benchley, author of the original novel, became so disturbed by this unintended consequence that he dedicated much of his later life to shark conservation, stating, "Knowing what I know now, I could never write that book today." Ironically, as scientific understanding of sharks has improved, many viewers have come to reinterpret Jaws itself. Modern audiences often see the film as a cautionary tale about humanity's arrogance in the face of nature rather than a straightforward monster movie. Mayor Larry Vaughan's insistence on keeping the beaches open despite clear danger has become a cultural reference point for prioritizing economic interests over public safety. A parallel drawn frequently during the COVID-19 pandemic. Like all great art, Jaws continues to evolve in meaning as society changes around it, and therein lies its lasting power. The enduring magic of Jaws isn't just that it works, it's that it shouldn't have worked at all. A first-time producer, a young director out of his depth, an unfinished script, a star that refused to perform, hostile shooting conditions, budget overruns, and studio panic. By all logic, these ingredients should have produced a legendary disaster. Instead, they combine to create cinematic alchemy. Jaws reminds us that limitation often breeds creativity. The malfunctioning shark forced Spielberg to suggest rather than show. The troubled production fostered genuine tension between actors that translated to screen chemistry. The constant problem-solving required of the cast and crew generated innovations that no comfortable shoot would have necessitated. Pull back the curtain on Jaws, and you find a perfect case study in how art emerges not despite obstacles, but because of them. The film succeeded not according to plan, but by adaptation to reality, much like its characters must adapt to survive their encounter with nature's perfect predator. Perhaps that's why it continues to resonate. Beneath the thrills and iconic moments, Jaws tells a deeply human story about facing the unknown, adapting to crisis, and finding strength in unlikely allies. It's about the triumph of ingenuity over brute force, of persistence over panic. The next time you watch Jaws, notice what isn't there. The shark that rarely appears, the exposition that's never spoken, the background that's merely implied. In these negative spaces lies the film's true genius, born of necessity and transformed into art. If you found these revelations fascinating, hit that like button and share your favorite Jaws moment in the comments. Because sometimes, the greatest achievements in cinema happen when everything goes wrong for all the right reasons.